Great, so I'd like to call the meeting to order, the Old Colony Planning Council Legislative Committee meeting to order. It is now 4:04 PM in the afternoon. I'll begin by reading the accessibility statement and Title VI non-discrimination statement as well. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Microphones or telephones will be used by all speakers. Large print materials are available upon advance request. If you'd like either of these accommodations, please contact Mary Waldron at 508-583-1833. The notice of non-discrimination rights and protections to the beneficiaries with regard to the federal Title VI non-discrimination protections and the state non-discrimination protections is posted in this meeting room and is available on the Old Colony Planning Council website. Please contact Mary Waldron at 508-583-1833 for more information. Thank you. Okay.
Megan, just the agenda, and I think the roll call's next.
Okay, Mary, you do the roll call? Or?
Rhonda Nyman.
Present.
Noreen O'Toole.
Present.
And Val Massard.
Present.
And just for purposes for staff, it's Mary Waldron, Megan Fournier, and David Klein. But I also want to make note that Yolanda Spinola did communicate, and he has sick children and asked to be excused. And but thank you. Roll call. There is a quorum present.
Okay, great. So we can move on next to agenda item number 4, review minutes from July 2024 meeting. And that record has everybody had a chance to read those meeting minutes? If so, we can take a vote on that, Mary.
Motion on the floor to accept.
Okay.
And properly second on the vote. Rhonda Nyman.
Yes.
Noreen O'Toole.
Accept.
And Valerie Massard.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have agenda item number 5. That's to discuss legislative priorities.
Correct. So if I could take the lead on this one, and Megan, you prepared a packet. So one of the things, so there was filing deadline coming at the end of this month. In fact, 2 minutes before I came on, I was on the phone with Senator Mike Brady. And so in the packet, you'll see a whole host of things. At the top of the list is the retirement legislation. We have gone through this when we had the retreat, but it's been on this agenda. It's been on the finance meeting. It's been on the council meeting. So I communicated with Representative Lenatra, who will be tending to be, I think, one of the more senior legislators from our region now, at least on the House side, to ask if she would sponsor the bill. That was just sent out yesterday, and I have not heard back, but I'm between things going on the Hill and other. So that is at the top. If I were to give a number 1 priority, that's what it would be. Secondarily, looking to have that legislative breakfast. And again, it's one of the things I talked about with Senator Brady, with myself going on vacation starting Thursday morning and not coming back to Tuesday. My hope was that we could get a date on the book so we can start looking for locations to hold the legislative breakfast. As all of you know, we're always in competition with either the chamber or with other community organizations and nonprofit groups. So I was hoping to get a start on this. I did send an email out to the legislators and saying we'll be looking to do this. And if anybody has some suggestions what date, but I didn't hear back. So I'm going to look to try to push this a little bit so we can get a date that works first for you as the committee. And we will run it pretty much how we did last time with just an overview. We had, I think, a really decent attendance from both the communities as well as from the legislators, and also from our delegates. So that is a priority. And then Joanne Zigman with the Regional Water Plan, part of the contract that is part of the 2-year contract with CDM, they have funding to connect with legislators. But what I was looking to do is make sure that we're in a coordinated effort. So if we're meeting with legislators about A through Y, and then the water plan is Z, that doesn't make sense to me. I want to make sure that, right, we could probably take a whole day and talk about the water project, but I'm going to recommend is we take a piece of it. And if there are other pieces that legislators would like to talk to on a side, then that's where they can go. But it really should be coordinated with this committee. So that's what I'm working on. I just wanted to confirm, I saw Val, you were shaking your head, yes, that would make sense. I hope that's how I was reading it. So those were really the top three, if I were given three. And the rest of this, if there are items in the economic development bond bill, there's funding, there's a regional sewer study. Oh, actually, is this what Don Sullivan put in, I think, Megan? Yeah, I can see his writing. He uses the acronyms way too much, but let me, yes. So there are some things, if there was going to be a new economic development bill, which I haven't heard yet. Regional sewer study, regional brownfield funds. And I know, Val, you sit on the brownfields committee, right?
I haven't been able to make any of the meetings.
That's okay. And then, Don also had some other items in there. So this was part of the packet. We still need to internally, from the managers, need to continue to vet this out. But the way that I'm seeing is that we want to be ready for when there is a request for items that we would like to have added to the budget, earmarks from either the House or the Senate side. If there is addendum to the outside budget, if there is, another bond legislation. So identifying what we see as the practitioners working with you, the communities, we want to make sure we have that. So that's the economic development bill. I'm going to have David speak to this next item because David with the elder population. So thank you, David, for being here today. If you can unmute yourself. David has been involved with a statewide group, the home care, and they have particular recommendations for, and specifically the nutrition. But David, go ahead.
Okay. Do you mind if I share my screen, Mary?
Unless it's the things that you already sent to Megan.
Yeah, no, it is.
Okay.
It is.
Megan, I'd rather if Megan, if you can just bring up that.
I have it right here.
This is the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Megan, could you go to the next page? Before I go any further, I just want to point out that this group, Mass Aging Access, is using an OCPC map over here on the left, a map that that Andrew Vidal created, and that they're using. Megan, could you advance the slide? Go to the next slide.
Yeah, she's there. We go.
Okay. Just demographically, as we all know, the aging population is increasing. It's up to 27% are age 60 and over. Next slide, please. So there's a program called the Home Care Program, which is a very broad name for a lot of different services. The services are over here on the right-hand side. They're bullet pointed. And on the left-hand side, it shows who's eligible. Next slide, please. Okay, so the aging service access points, such as Old Colony Elder Services, or our partner organization, they've got in 2023, 65% of their consumers enrolled had an average income of less than 26,000, with 36% of having incomes between 10,000 and 19,000. And as you can see on the bottom of the slide, it says 42% receiving Mass Health, and the average age of people in the program is age 80. Next slide, please. So interestingly enough, at the time that COVID hit, the program was generally funded adequately, but we didn't have enough home care workers to cover the people that needed to be covered, because the numbers of people that needed to be covered were increasing. So the state successfully increased pay for direct care workers. That's what they call these Chapter 257 increases. And that resulted in an increased amount of people who are working in the industry. When COVID hit, it took people away, and these increases and COVID, getting better, brought them back into the workforce. In addition, they've invested into, in addition to our own ombudsman program, the state has invested in programs to transition people out of nursing homes that may not need to stay in nursing homes, because that nursing homes are really the most expensive of all the care options. Next slide, please. We're getting toward the end here. This is really
Sorry, I
the
think
kind of the,
I have a slow connection, so I promise I've been hitting it right away. It's just
I believe you, Megan. You're more efficient than me, so I'm sure you are. This is a really significant slide, because the state is asking for, we're asking for more money from the state, and it's millions and millions of dollars. But the reason that we're asking for more money from the state for the home care program is because at the end of the day, it saves the state money. And the reason is because of that. The reason that is because consumers that stay at home, that middle bullet point, the cost for the year ranges between about $3,600 and $10,200. Whereas the last bullet point says the average cost of a Medicaid, which the state pays into for nursing home care, is between $77,000 and $175,000. So I think you need to go to the next slide, Meg. Either that or this slide is cut off. So could you go back for a second? And I think the slide is cut off. But basically what it's showing here, I'm going to do it on my own screen. What it's showing here is for each person, yes, it's there in yellow. For each person that the state could use home care services for, as opposed to them going to nursing homes, the state will save a minimum of $22,000 per person and up to as much as $73,000 per person per year. So the fact that the home care line item is underfunded is really concerning, because it's going to be draining state assets if we don't fix it. And also, we're very, very worried. If you keep going down, thanks, Megan. We're very worried that the people that were brought into to be direct care workers with this additional pay, if we're not able to pay them at all, they may start leaving the industry, and then if we need to use them again, they won't be there. So it's really a disaster that these two line items are underfunded. The reason that they're underfunded is because when the state went to estimate the next year's expenses, when they were budgeting, they just used the prior year as the example. And the problem with using the prior year in this situation is because the baby boomers are aging into the system, and the growth rate is about 8 or 9%. So in their budgeting, they really need to use an assumed growth rate that is much higher than they had been using. And I do think that they understand that now. But in the meantime, we have like a $54 million between these two line items, a $54 million deficit in how the program is going to be run. And to be clear, one of two things is going to happen if we don't get the word out to our legislators and to people to call our legislators to advocate for this. One of two things are the services will be curtailed, and they'll be huge waiting lines for people to get home care services, which again is going to cost the state money because some of those people, as much as a third of those people, will end up going to nursing homes. And or if has been happening, the aging service network has been keeping up with the demand, but they've been generating losses, and actually we'll see agencies going out of business. We're talking about agencies like Old Colony Elder Services going out of business because they can't keep up with the payments for the home care services. So this is like a perfect storm of why we need to spend money to save money in the long term.
So David, just to kind of separate a couple things out. So there is an ongoing effort statewide,
Yep.
correct, for advocacy. We are bringing this up to the legislative committee just so we're aware. So when we do meet with legislators, the timing of this, I think, because if the filing of bills is by the end of January, is the home care, are they filing information that we want to come out to be in support of?
Yes. Well, we want to be in support of the line items that are on Megan's screen right now that she's sharing. Line item 91101630 and line item 91101633. Those are the two line items that we have to be in support of increasing the budget for.
So I guess maybe I'm a little bit confused because that's a line item, but the legislative session hasn't started yet. So this might be a line item from previous year because we have a whole new legislators.
That's
So
right. It's for FFY 25, which we're in right now. So we're underfunded for this current fiscal year.
but I guess maybe I did not see this in time to read through it myself. But I guess what I'm saying is the line item that's in this PowerPoint, that's referring to a specific
Budgetary bill.
budgetary bill.
Yes.
But that was, okay. It's hard for me to understand where the budgetary comes in because the legislative session just started.
Well, if they had addressed this a month ago or 2 months ago or 3 months ago, then this wouldn't be here, but it's still here because
Well,
it's
it's
still
still
an
here,
issue.
so what I guess I would just ask before so my recommendation to the members would be, we support replacing these dollars, but I would then ask you, David, to go back to the advocacy group to find out, because again, bill filing isn't until the end of January. We can't go back to last year's because there's a whole new legislature, so we can be clear as to what we're advocating for.
Well, we have a committee meeting tomorrow, so maybe I'll learn more. But I think that whatever bill this ends up being in, it is to support those two line items. But thanks, Mary, for making that clarification.
So members, I know we can, just because David did take the time, and I think it's important, and again, the work that we are doing, we as an organization, the age-friendly communities, I know worked in Kingston, worked in Duxbury, worked in Easton, there's other communities. I count myself because I'm in that age group. As we're aging, these are all the more, not because it's personal, but to David's point in terms of the demographics, those numbers are increasing and increasing within our 17 communities. So what I would recommend is that while there's a specific line item that as we move forward for the legislative breakfast, that we in fact support finding the funds to support the case management for all of the reasons, right? It's across the board an industry that's becoming harder and harder and to support. But I'll leave that for you as the committee members to decide.
I think it's a good idea.
Right. Thank you, Val. I think the action item just is that we'll incorporate this, and David will have an updated information. Again, David, you will be one cog of maybe 5 or 6 different topics. So when you are able to update that, get that updated information, get that to Megan, because as we put together the packet for that legislative breakfast, again, to be determined, that we be succinct And you'll be there, David, to answer any questions.
Right. You know what, Mary, as we're talking now, I think I remember one other thing that is more to your point, and that's that there was one legislature, I want to say it was Senator Sear or Senator Tarr, I think it was Senator Tarr, who wanted who put a bill together specifically for these two line items. And then there was another group that put another bill to do the exact same thing, but it was part of a larger omnibus bill. So, and that same dynamic could happen in this next session.
Okay.
But thank you,
Rhonda?
everyone. I would say the only other thing besides this that I would consider at the same level would be a similar deficit in nutrition funding. When I say similar, I mean similar level of need, but it's not going to be $50 million. It's more like a $5 million deficit, but still, you know, I think everybody kind of understands the nutrition part a little bit easier than the home care part. But thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to show everyone this.
I don't know if
Thanks,
anybody has
Megan.
questions, David?
Nope, thank you, David. That was very helpful. I read through this earlier and I was a little bit confused myself. So no, thank you for that. You did a great job explaining everything.
Thank you. Thanks, Rhonda.
So
Thank you,
we'll
David.
we'll update this, and then Megan, what else do we have on for the priorities? Or was
I
that
have it up. That was it.
it? Okay. Just before
And we
Charlie
have
left.
stuff from July, but that's,
Yeah, thank you. And
Oops.
I think Charlie had, actually, what I'm gonna have you do is just kind of review this. So back to what you were just going through with the highlights with green, please. Further down, just what you were, there we go. So again, to his credit, Senator Brady reached out to me, said, hey, Mary, we have some things. Each of the legislators got like call it a $10 million ask. Senator, I know, so Senator Brady did. Charlie and I put our heads together, and there was, you know, there are some things that we put on here, $2 million for this, the grant that we didn't get, but there was some, it was an allocation within the economic development bill. There were some things for the Massasoit intersection coming in from Whitman. It's always a tangle there. East Bridgewater, there was some work that we were doing. Again, we're trying to really spread across, right? So in Whitman, there was, we were looking for some projects. So again, you know, again, we're talking about Hanson. Was there anything else after the Hanson?
yeah. Halifax.
Halifax and then some downtown
DA and
projects.
Wildlands. It's coming.
So again, you know, I know Val, there's been a lot of things going on in Kingston. You can probably come up with some ideas. It's when we meet as a council, it's always hard to kind of capture from the council members to bring them by way of hybrid meetings, to have them open up about some of the ideas. But we would love to kind of have this laundry list, at least a couple items from each of the towns that the towns are asking, and then we as a regional planning agency say that it's a priority as well. So now this legislator is hearing from several sources that this is an important project, that so it's, if it's not in a legislative filing, then it is done by way of a an earmark within, you know, a budgetary, right?
Yeah, okay.
So, and just because I'm CC'd on all those emails back and forth, particularly like the quarter study, you know, I know, you know, Plymouth, and talking to Lee, he has some ideas about supporting the resiliency group that that has been undertaken. So we do not know some of the questions that have come up, like Preston Huckabee and others had asked, you know, what is the prediction for the impact that DC with the change of administration, what is that going to have on us? We don't know. We don't. And I think there is a fear for the worst, but we won't know that until it actually happens. The good news is about the BIL, what am I thinking?
Bipartisan.
Bipartisan
Ship.
thinking. Infrastructure. So
ma'am.
that is a bond and no one can change that. The funding's still there. So there are still funds to be coming our way, and we're developing a relationship with our congressional offices. So recently, as you saw, that there was the $1.9 million that OCPC got from the federal government, having to do more with the transportation and planning side. But we did purposefully a press release that included Congressman Keating's office, Congressman Lynch's office, Senator Markey's office, and Senator Warren's office. They were all very quick to respond in a very short period of time. We want to just give them the accolades because that's where the funds are. And the same thing when there's state funding, we want to make sure that we give the accolades to the legislature for supporting us in that manner. So again, we're the worker bees, so we're glad to do it under the OCPC to put the applications together. But this is a part where I think we need to do maybe a better job of reaching out to the delegates. Some of the delegates have a very good idea when you are a select board member, if you're a planner. And then there are, not to their fault or anything, but there are some who may not be as engaged in their communities. And right now, the town of Plimpton doesn't have any representation at all after several times of reaching out. So we'll cover those communities that may not, but for those looking at Whitman, looking at certainly Hanover and Kingston, for those that are on, Londos and Brockton. So Brockton has always a strong need, and you've got everybody, the whole cavalry comes to help Brockton out because they want to help Brockton out. But there we have the rest of our 16 communities in our region that we certainly want to continue to advocate. And this legislative committee, I think, is a really critical way. So we're prepared, whether it's AAA that David explained. I know that the DLTA funding, we have to get approval every year, and we're always fighting to get more money because, the limited money that we get is never enough. So we're going to continue to work on those funds. And then just for your purposes as well, there is a monthly meeting with the federal office, the federal funds office. Quentin is runs that meeting, and all communities are invited, but Paul Umano is constantly on there, and he's constantly looking for additional funds for the region, for the communities. And so looking at all, and we're really turning over every rock. I do consider that piece under the legislative subcommittee. So I think, Megan, the only other thing that we really had after this was from the conversation at the last committee meeting was the two items that I believe it was John Costa that brought him up at the meeting. Did you add that in there?
Right. I was just now that I forgot to. Yes, it was the septic program discussing why. So it came up because Sean was providing an update with Avon and why a family had to wait. But it's because Avon had to spend down the rest of their grant. And then John was asking why they had to wait for that purpose to happen. And so I think he was talking about bringing that up. Well, we mentioned that we can bring it up to the legislative committee to see if it's something that we should.
But
if I could butt in for a second, that's kind of mandated, to a specific law that really has nothing to do with us. And OCPC has their own schedule when they can get that work done, and when people have to have the applications in. And I don't think that OCPC has a role in this. I mean, I don't think you can do anything to make this go any faster, because I don't think you have any controls over that. I know when I worked in Hanson a long time ago, I think just OCPC helping the communities with the applications and moving it forward is a big service that you really don't get a lot of money for to begin with. So I think it's kind of out of our hands, legislatively speaking, if that makes any sense, that we really can't do anything about this.
Yeah, what I've asked staff to do on the whole septic program is, go ahead, David, I know you have to go. We have to do a cost benefit analysis. I
Right.
think if we're spending a lot of money with a staff person on something that doesn't bring in revenues,
Right.
it gets evaluated every year. So I do know, and just back to what Megan had referenced was that there was a whole, right, it was John Costa, it was about the program. So
Mhm.
to your point, there are funds, we run the basically the loan program, but it's in conjunction with the community. And we're actually at a point where we're almost thinking that we want to charge more, so at least we can recoup some more of our money rather than we take a loss, just plain and simple.
I think you should be charging more. Yes.
So that may or may not be for legislative, but I asked Megan to bring those topics up
Sure.
because it was brought up by, it was in this case, John Costa, because the other topic that John brought up was housing. And remember, Megan, you had it in an email to me, what it was.
Yep, the other one, so I have it right here. There was a higher so at the end, we did bring up other topics that we'd want to bring up. So they said there was a higher interest in housing issues such as 40B, accessory worry, and housing bond bill. So those were just the common items that
to be talked about at a council meeting.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you. I just wanted just to make sure it was vetted through this. I think it doesn't necessarily belong with the legislative committee at this point because it is particularly each of those are state funding. What it does require and will require is probably someone like Jason DeRoche from my office to do some housing, or at least putting together maybe like a housing resource guide for council members with questions that come up. If that's appropriate, if that's something
Yeah,
that you.
and you know, something like the ADUs, the accessory dwelling units. I had talked to Laurie about that, and you know, we could all get together and do a little slide presentation on that, just general points, you
Yeah.
know, to the communities of, you know, how it will affect you. Something like that, I think, is appropriate.
Yeah, I think that is, as you all know, this week was the first week. Actually, today's the second day that Laurie's back to work. So she's playing catch up. It is on one of her items and working
Sure.
with Jason to do some webinars. But it's also,
Yeah.
I think, because we don't get any really dollars that come with providing training, but whether it's CHAPA, whether APA,
Right,
Mass
right.
APA, there's lots of resources that are out there for you planners, even for, I know that the citizen training holds a lot of information about housing. That could be another way that we can
Yes.
educate. So Megan, maybe as an aside, what I'm going to recommend, if we can, I'll do it when I come back from vacation. But just put together a housing resource guide, and that will
Yeah.
include, if
Yep.
not free, then limited or low cost training such as the citizen planner. And again, I think John is a very strong advocate he's a former engaged person in the town, and wants a lot of information, but there's our role as a regional planning agency for what we can or should be doing. So I think that's what Becky was trying to get to when she was having conversation with John.
Right.
So I'm going to do that. And then actually I'm going to send that resource guide. I'm going to have have Jason take a look at it with Lori, and then maybe Noreen, Val, and even you, Rhonda, I'll have you take a look at it from your sets of eyes.
Sure.
See if that's something that that would be helpful for the layperson or a board member's view. Because then if they want more information, then they're either going to invest in a planner in their community and stay with that, or they have to go somewhere else.
So Mary, I think that's really important. I know for Hanover, we didn't have a town planner, then we had a planner. Now
Right.
we do not have a town planner
Right.
due to our budget cuts and things like that are going on. So that would be really helpful. I know just today, I set up an appointment with our Joe Stack in our housing department, our building guy. And because somebody wanted to come and speak to him about the ADUs.
Okay.
So,
Right,
you
the
know,
building department, right, because there's.
Yeah.
Coming up. So,
so
Rhonda, did you say you don't have a planner?
no,
Oh,
we we didn't have one, then we had one for a little bit. He came over from Pembroke.
Yeah,
And now we don't have one. I don't know if it's due to, we're facing override, if it's due to
Oh,
budget cuts or what, I'm
yeah.
not sure. I know we
Wow,
didn't have
geez.
one.
Yeah.
I really didn't get an explanation on that. We're really having some tough times
Sure.
over there. So that would be helpful to Hanover, for folks or,
Good.
and even the MBTA Communities Act. We don't want to bring it up at town meeting because our town manager's waiting to see what Milton's going to do. So
Sure.
that, I mean, I'm kind of going off track a little bit here, but for us,
It's
I'm like,
relative. Right? It is relative.
what can we do to kind of get the ball rolling one way or the other instead of waiting for Milton? And I think I spoke with Jason a little bit a
Did,
while ago on that, Mary.
yes.
I just would like if we could educate the board a little bit more about that, whether we put it back on the warrant for town meeting. I think it should be, but again, I don't have enough substantial, information to say, yes, that's why we should do it, I guess, so that might be helpful, I guess.
We'll work on that and vet that document through you, through this committee.
Okay, thank
and-
you.
And lastly is the legislative breakfast, which we already talked about. I'm just keep an eye on for your emails. As soon as I hear back from a couple of legislators, we're just going to pull the trigger to
Okay.
get it scheduled. And again, we're going to try to do it centrally located. So legislators from all over the region, which tends to be right within Pembroke, Halifax area. But if you have some suggestions of locations that would be centrally located, please get them to Megan. And, the legislative priorities that's left, the others, that list can go on, as we talked about at the last meetings, right? It can go on and on and on and on. I think the idea is that, number one, we need to be ready as an organization for when the ask comes to us to say, hey, what are your priorities for legislation and how do we, be ready to file, as what David put together, and other things. And then just so I'm not going back to legislative delegation every other week to say, oh, by the way, can you support this? And oh, by the way, can you support this? I would really like us, and we do not have a legislative, contact. I mean, MAPC serves as our legislative, as the Mass Association of Regional Planning Agencies, as our eyes and ears. They're very good at it. We have a great relationship with them. I have every intention to continue to stay in touch with them. Several of their staff have also offered to attend our meetings. I will invite them maybe to the next one and to even our legislative breakfast, to help us continue to, keep us on a straight and narrow. So we will share as soon as we get MAPC legislative priorities, and MARPA's priorities, we'll share that with you, but they will be very similar to the past years.
Great. Thank you, Mary.
I think that's it. I think I just was going to see if anybody else had any other legislative priorities that we should be on top of.
I can't think of anything because the ADU bylaw, they're trying to address it.
Right, trying. And again, Val, the state, and I'm just going to say it, but I've seen it, but the state did not roll out the MBTA nor the ADU in the proper way that they should, right? There's timelines and it's
Yeah.
just,
Not enough time.
No.
and
Just
perhaps we leave that as a comment to legislators saying, before these state agencies roll out things, whether it's planning or whether it's economic development, they really need to be working with us as regional planning agencies, as well as the communities, on how it's being formatted.
Yeah, but they don't listen. They think
No.
that they've got it right.
Yeah, I know.
I think what was really tough is the public comment period on ADUs was during the holidays.
Right.
Okay.
It
And
was.
I think that was the last thing on people's minds is ADUs and making comments.
Mhm.
It just, everything happened so swiftly, I think, on that.
So Mary, just something that sticks out in my mind from the last legislative breakfast that we had. I know the legislator said, when we think about planning, maybe think about planning it earlier. And I'm sure you're well
Yes.
aware of that, but just a reminder that I think we need to have the breakfast earlier than later if we need to
That
get
is
things
correct.
done.
Yes,
So just a
That's
reminder.
that's exactly
Just
right.
remind
That's
that.
why it's at the top of the list, but that's
Okay.
okay. That's, right, hearing that and repeating it. So Mike Brady, Senator Brady, is gonna get a hold of it. My neighbor up the street who I helped out, Bridget Fluff, is a new legislator, so she will is also on top of things. And none of the new legislators have aides yet, so but I think that's where we can also utilize someone like Becky, because she still is working back with the legislature again. So
Good.
that's going to be number one. So I may be able to find some information out before I leave for a few days, but it's like my number one priority when I come back.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Have a good time, by the way. when
Thank
you
you.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Enjoy
Someplace
yourself.
warm. I know,
Oh,
going to
Nice and
Dominican
warm, huh?
Republic. So
Oh, nice.
my son-in-law's family's from there, so we're gonna be visiting them with my grandson, and then
Oh,
and then
Great.
getting a few days. I'm just telling you right now, it's not long enough.
that's no,
No.
never is, never is.
But
Wow.
thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Okay, so,
enjoy.
do we, adjourn, Mary? Do we
If-
need a
if
roll call vote?
Someone
You
should
want-
make, no roll call vote, but if someone
Okay.
can make a motion in second, we should be all good.
Motion.
Thanks, Val.
Okay, second, does someone else second it? Or,
I'll second it.
okay,
we go.
thanks, Noreen. Hope you
Yeah.
feel better.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Everyone.
All righty.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Happy New